Welcome back. You're watching Overdrive. Now we're in the midst of testing the automatic variants of the newly launched Honda City, the Verna, as well as the Skoda Rapid, and we're on the cusp of finding out just which of these sedans gives you the most bang for your buck and also peace of mind.
When you get going in the Verna, the one thing that you will notice is that you do feel a little more vibration, especially around the idle mark, and you notice it when you actually open the doors with the engine running. That actually translates into how refined it sounds a little higher up in the rev range. It's not an engine that you want to be stressing too much, just purely in the way that it sounds, but like we said, the strength of this engine is in its mid-range. What you really like about the 1-litre turbo petrol and DCT combination in the Verna is the fact that it just feels so effortless. I barely roll onto the throttle and I'm crossing 100 right there. That's its strength and its greatest weakness, because this car feels really nice at throttle inputs up to about 50%. What happens when you step on it is that you sometimes confuse the gearbox, especially when you floor it completely, and the engine doesn't sound too nice at the upper reaches of the rev range. It sounds the best till about 4,500 RPM, which is a bit of a conundrum because it's actually a little step in power at about 4,700 RPM. Not that you need it, because there definitely is torque available below that, and actually the best way to drive this car and make good pace is to drive it at half throttle, like I said. In the city, the DCT does a good job of giving you gears imperceptibly. It is quite smooth shifting. There's no shift shock. There's none of that usual jitteriness that you associate with DSTs at very low speeds in stop code traffic. It seems to pick a gear early on and stick with it till it knows when to shift up. It does try and stay on the more efficient side, so at very low throttle inputs it will shift under 2000 RPM, but it's quite intelligent because if you give it just a little more gas, it knows that you want to go a little quicker, and it keeps you in the meat of the rev range, which happens to be between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM. Of course, a big draw for the turbo DCT combination for the Verna especially is the fact that it gets paddle shifters, and they do just help put you in touch with the powertrain just a little bit more. So when you are trying to drive enthusiastically around the corners, you tend to sort of overlook the fact that the Verna is a little too soft for really pushing hard. It's, like we said, a car that you drive maybe at 60-70%. Now you'll probably notice this slightly strange behavior in the way the gearbox reacts to part throttle. When you get off the gas, you go into coast mode quite easily, and then it slips the clutch a little bit to bring you back up to speed. You notice it about 50% of the time, and when you do, it makes it feel not entirely as premium as you would expect it to be. That being said, the gearing is relaxed enough for you to carry an indicated 100 kmph at about 2000 RPM, going up to about 2500 RPM at an indicated 120 kmph. Of the two 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol engines here, the one in the Rapid is just a little more refined, a little less gruff sounding, and a little less like a 3-cylinder. In fact, even the power delivery just feels a little more characterful, because once you cross the 2000 RPM mark, you feel it building, and above 3, there's a lot of fun to be had. It's not as much fun as the manual gearbox equipped version of this car, but then that's the trade-off that you're making, the utility, the practicality of having a gear shift-free driving experience. However, the automatic is a torque converter. It's a 6-speed unit, and in regular city driving, you're going to find that it largely matches your needs. It's quite intuitive in the way that it shifts, though you do feel a little bit of the shifts. Putting the gearbox into S mode does help that a little bit, but there's always the feeling that the engine doesn't really match revs as it downshifts, so you feel a little bit of a lurch on each gear change as you're decelerating. Given how strong this engine feels otherwise, it feels like the lack of paddle shifters is really a missed opportunity here. You can put it into manual mode, but paddle shifters would have just increased the sense of involvement. The City is a bit of a contradiction when it comes to its ride and handling package. It's quite pliant, bordering on soft in fact. Over dips and crests you will feel a little too much body movement, especially if you're carrying speed. Of course, like with the Verna, the flip side is that it's very comfortable in the city, and despite that, it doesn't scrape over speed breakers. So when you go over a speed breaker, the front doesn't touch and the rear doesn't want to rebound against its stoppers either. Now the reason I call it a contradiction is because the steering on the City actually feels near perfect. It's light enough at city speeds for very easy one-handed use, and it picks up weight beautifully on the highways, feels nice and solid. Even when you're trying to take a corner, it weighs up just the right amount and lets you know what the car is doing. Problem is that the car is probably leaning over on its side, being quite softly sprung. If you enter a corner with a little too much enthusiasm, you will feel all that load go straight to the outside tire. You do get quite a bit of tire squeal and you will feel the understeer. Well, that's the plus side of having a good steering, I guess. Of the three cars, the City is the one that's going to make you feel like it's going to bottom out over a bad road, and it's the one that will definitely let you know that you need to cut speed over a bad road. This is not a car that you can bomb over a bad patch in. Now, Hyundai has made some great advancements with its chassis and dynamic setups recently. The Verna, it's an older car, this is the facelifted car, so it doesn't get quite the whole extent of that. It is a very pliant suspension, it's set up to be soft, so it's very comfortable at city speeds, suits up quite a lot of the road surface. But at higher speeds, you do get a little more movement inside the cabin than you would really like. On less than perfect road surfaces, there's also a fair amount of road noise that comes in, and you can hear the suspension at work. It's not the most quiet system out there. In typical Hyundai fashion, the Verna steering is light and breezy around the city. It does weigh up quite a bit on the highway, but an interesting observation that we made when we tested the CVT version of the car, which is a 1.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol with the CVT, we were actually blown away by how smooth the CVT is. And that car steering felt just a little heavier, just a little more heft around center to help you keep it in a straight line without too much of steering input. Ultimately though, the Verna 1.5 CVT doesn't save you a lot of money over this turbo DCT variant, and for the extra money you are getting a more advanced gearbox, so that would be the one that we picked. When it comes to the ride and handling package, the Rapid is very, very sorted. It feels very poised, it stays neutral through most anything, and even over these dips and crests, it stays very level. Where you're truly going to appreciate this package is when you get to a set of twisties and find that you can point the nose of the Rapid exactly where you want it to go, and the chassis just follows through and lets you hold that line. There's not a lot of body roll, there's not a lot of lean. In fact, you can even lean on the brakes themselves, really pitch it into a corner and get it turned, and it just puts a smile on your face. Of course, the Rapid does have that typical German ride quality, which is a little firm at lower speeds, but just gets better and better when the speeds go up. So you might not like traveling over a broken section of road at say 20-30, but just up the speed to about 50 and trust that the car can take it.
The Rapid, unsurprisingly, is the value choice considering its late years. Though, stay away from top variants if you don't want that impression to change. In manual form, it's extremely fun to drive. Unfortunately, that doesn't fully translate over to the Slush Box Auto. For the buyer looking for a richer set of features, perhaps even a more modern feeling cabin, the Verna does very well, and the turbo DCT pairing results in easy smooth pace when asked for it, as long as the demands are reasonable. As a complete package, the Honda City comes out on top despite the higher asking price for a CVT. Though a wide spread of variants means there should be something for every budget. Space and comfort are two things it has in spades, and the high efficiency is a pleasant surprise, making it the winner of this test.
As I mentioned right at the start, these three sedans are your latest offerings in the automatic midsize sedan space, but you have older options as well, such as the Volkswagen Vento, the Maruti Suzuki Ciaz, and also the Toyota Yaris. But you let us know in our comment sections on YouTube, Facebook or Twitter that which of these sedans would you prefer as your daily driver. Time then for us to take our final break here on the show, but coming up on the other side, we will acquaint you with Honda's latest 160cc motorcycle, the Hornet 2.0.